A Mexican killer praised by a president. The Mexican doctor who inspired Hannibal Lecter's books. A female wrestler whose victims were old ladies. A killer who left suitcases in the subway. The cannibal who seduced women with poetry. Get ready because you are about to see the most chilling serial killers of Mexico. She was a wrestler and she called herself La Dama del Silencio. I am going to show you right now a clip of an interview made 1 week before she became a serial killer.
Soy la señora Juana Barraza Samperi.
¿Ruda o técnica?
Ruda de corazón.
¿Y dónde es más ruda, aquí o en casa?
Pues en los dos lados.
She disguised herself as a nurse or a social worker and she deceived old ladies by telling them that she will give them help from the government. And once she entered in the houses, she took a stethoscope or a cord and then she strangled them. They captured her as she was fleeing a house in the Moctezuma neighborhood, where a tenant saw her running out. She was sentenced to more than 700 years in prison for 16 homicides and 12 robberies. But what happened to her in prison? She married a male inmate at the Santa Marta Catitla prison. She runs a taco stand inside the women's jail and is always seen smiling and dancing with other female inmates. She sold popcorns outside the ring. Between October and November 2005, the bodies of 2 men were found on a public road inside black travel suitcases near the Chabacano metro station in the Asturias neighborhood of Mexico City. And because the victims belonged to the LGBT community, he was nicknamed the Rainbow Killer or El Sádico. Raúl Marroquín Reyes went to nightclubs where gay men would approach him, and then he would invite them to his apartment, where an accomplice was waiting for him. Once there, he kidnapped them and demanded ransom from their families in the hope of freeing them. Despite receiving the deposits, they put them away. And you know what the most frightening thing is? That his accomplice, Juan Enrique, remains at large. Imagine that you are in a park with your friends, and suddenly you see a guy with some books on the ground, who is going to give you a book if you listen to him recite one of the most romantic poems of your life, and then go for a coffee with him. And by that point, he has already had victims cooked into tacos al pastor. And then your male friends tell you not to go out with that man because you don't know him. When the police decide to break into this freak's apartment, they see that the windows are covered with newspaper. There are black and red candles and there is a horrible stench. As they search, one of the officers opens the closet and sees 2 black trash bags. When he opens them, he finds multiple pairs of women's shoes inside. The same victims he would seduce on the street and woo with poetry. Upon opening the second bag, the police find a torso. On the table, they found a plate with leftover meat, limet, and a beer. Later studies showed that these remains belonged to one of the victims. When surprised by the officers, he threw himself out of the window and suffered a mild concussion. These 4 little old ladies were the greatest serial criminals in the history of Mexico. A well with more than 90 bodies was discovered behind an abandoned ranch. For 25 years, these 4 sisters from Jalisco kept dozens of women working in inhuman conditions in clandestine brothels. The Poquianchis, named so because the former owner of the brothel was a transvestite nicknamed El Poquianchi. The name of the brothel was La Barca de Oro. They had ranches that operated as brothels and cantinas in the states of Jalisco, Hidalgo, Guanajuato, and San Luis Potosí. The name of the sisters were María de Jesús Valenzuela, Delfina Valenzuela, Eva Valenzuela, and Carmen Valenzuela. They went from ranch to ranch offering work to poor peasant women, or they forcibly picked them up in the stake bed trucks. They bribed the police to maintain this horror factory, and also the army itself would guard their brothels. When the victims became pregnant or were no longer to the client's like, they put them away and threw them into the wells that they had built at the back of the brothel. One of the victims managed to escape from where she was being held and alerted the police. Netflix released the miniseries Las Muertas based on the novel by the writer Jorge Barguengoitia. Pushing a baby stroller and a father carrying merchandise, but in reality the father was transporting bones and the rest of the victims to dump them in the vacant lots in Ecatepec, state of Mexico. There are many types of meat, first, second and third class. The prettier the better, that's what the monster of Ecatepec said. His wife prepared the victims in tamales because he didn't know how to cook. His wife Patricia helped him catch the victims since she sold used clothes, perfumes, cell phones and costume jewelry. They would tell them to go to their house to see the items and there they would trap them. They ate some parts in soups and stored others in the refrigerator, and the leftovers were thrown in vacant lots. They also sold the bones to witchcraft doctors for their witchcraft. The coldness and madness of Hannibal Lecter has an essentially Mexican air. The American novelist Thomas Harris acknowledged in 2013 that his literary work was inspired by a Mexican doctor. The story of how Harris met Dr. Baji took place in the 60s, when he was investigating the case of Simmons, a Texas-born murderer of 3 young people with a disfigured face, who was captured in Mexico and was awaiting deportation when he tried to escape from the Topo Chico prison in Nuevo León. Helped by a corrupt guard who treacherously shot him and tortured by the Mexican judicial authorities, he required medical attention. Harris, who had arrived to interview Simmons, was surprised when the prison warden told him that the inmate he had come to interview was convalescing. He then entered the cell block and was assigned Dr. Baji, who served as the prison surgeon, as his escort. Using tourniquets, he had prevented him from bleeding out and dying. After the interview with Simmons, the journalist and the doctor had a pleasant chat, and he was surprised by his excellent manners, elegance and intelligence, but was even more impressed when the doctor gave him a psychological profile of Simmons. They said goodbye politely, and the doctor gave him his name. Harris invited the doctor to lunch if he was ever in Texas and gave him his address. When he left the office of the doctor who had operated on Simmons, he asked the prison warden how long the doctor had been working there, since he noticed that the doctor was treating the guards. The answer would give life to Lecter. "Do you know who he is?" The prison warden replied to Harris. "The doctor is a murderer. Since he's a surgeon, he can pack his victim into a surprisingly small box. He will never leave this place. He's insane." The crime? He had taken the life of his partner Jesus Castillo Rangel and buried him clandestinely. The doctor would divide his body into 7 parts, all in perfect cuts, then place the body in a box and take it to the trunk of his car. His mistake was going to the house of his victims and to ask to borrow a shovel. He headed to a vacant lot, and as a bad luck would have it, a cow unearthed the body. By the way, the doctor was the last Mexican sentenced to the death penalty in the civilian justice system, but his sentence was commuted to 35 years in prison. When The Silence of the Lambs was released in the theaters in 1991, Thomas Harris couldn't say publicly who inspired the most famous cannibal of the 7th art, because Dr. Baji was still alive. But in 2013, when the novel celebrated 25 years since its publication and 22 since its theatrical release, in the anniversary prologue, Harris finally revealed that the doctor he used to call Salazar was Dr. Baji, and that he had been the basis of his inspiration for creating the character of Lecter. Harris would also write Red Dragon, in which the criminal would be based on Dyke Simmons. Just imagine you are in the Congress of the Union, the deputies rise to their feet and give a thunderous ovation to a man entering the chamber. The man they are applauding is a serial killer who strangled 4 women, buried them in the garden, and then lay in bed with the corpses. This was Goyo Cárdenas. He was extremely intelligent, as by the age of 27 he was already a Pemex scholarship holder and a prestigious student at the School of Chemistry of UNAM, the most prestigious university in Mexico. He was cultivated as he knew how to play the piano and paint. He had a sick relationship with his mother. In less than a year, he put away his victims, which aligns with the concept of a lightning killer. One night he took a woman of the night to his house, and in intimacy he placed a wire around her trachea. But the victim who sealed his fate was a friend of his, Graciela. The two of them were in the car and he slapped him for trying to kiss her. This guy got angry and beat her to death. And if it weren't enough, he slept all night in the car before burying her. But she was the daughter of a well-known lawyer in Mexico, and this set off all the alarms. Jose Acosta was the Mexican detective who led the team, the same one who captured the ogress of Roma, la ogresa de la Roma, another murderer. Goyo's lawyer pleaded insanity and requested that he to be sent to a psychiatric hospital. When the police inspected the garden, they couldn't believe it. There was a human foot sticking out of the ground. When they caught this killer, he loved the media attention and even staged reenactments of the crimes in front of the press. He went so far as to place the corpse on the police officers' necks to explain his crimes as if they were school lessons. Just like Charles Manson, women wrote him letters and visited him at the trials and in his cell. At the very trials, they flirted with him. There was much debate even among Mexico's most eminent psychiatrists. Some doctors claimed he killed due to epilepsy. The father of Mexican criminology, Alfonso Quiroz, argued that Goyo was a perverse criminal who knew what he was doing. He was sent to La Castañeda, but he escaped and went on vacation to Oaxaca. He was captured and thrown in the Black Palace of Lecumberri, a famous Mexican prison at that time. Just as Dr. Baji, the inspiration for Hannibal Lecter, was the prison doctor, Goyo was the prison lawyer. In Lecumberri prison, the Mexican miracle occurred, as he changed. He spent 34 years locked up, but he didn't waste his time, for he memorized the entire penal code by heart to defend himself and other inmates. He wrote a book that was sold inside the prison. He painted pictures, played the organ in his cell, and even had a wife and children. He handled the inmates' cases. And then the unthinkable happened. President Luis Echeverría, the same one who promoted Cancun as a tourist destination, granted him a pardon. He was invited by the Chamber of Deputies and by the Secretary of the Interior, Mario Moya, to be exhibited as the ultimate trophy of the Mexican penitentiary system. But what do you think? Did he really rehabilitate himself? Or did he manipulate the psychiatrists and politicians into believing his good man act?